let's talk to John Rentoul, chief political commentator from The Independent. John, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I can't think of anything to argue with you this week.
I know, it's shocking, isn't it?
There's not really.
I mean, usually in this situation, I resort to saying that Tony Blair was actually a very good prime minister.
Excellent, yes.
But actually, you probably agree with that broadly.
Well, yeah. I mean, I do say this, and people really hate me for it. That aside from the bit at the end and the whole Iraq war situation, I thought he was a terrific prime minister.
Well, indeed, and I think this is beginning to dawn on people. I mean, every prime minister since has done their darndest to try and make him look good.
Yes. Well, the thing is, Keir Starmer wishes he was Tony Blair, I suppose. Gordon Brown probably also wished he was Tony Blair, but they probably both, in their own little private way, don't really like the fact that they want to be Tony Blair. They'd rather they didn't feel like that, but they do anyway. Yeah,
no, that's right, and I completely agree with you about Keir Starmer's problem of being over emphatic. I mean, he keeps on talking about 100% this and 100% that, and no rise in taxes at all, no rise in council tax, not a penny on council tax.
Yeah, I mean,
all those things just too absolute.
It is, and I saw it yesterday, and obviously it was relevant yesterday because we've now got some councils who are going to put taxes up, council taxes particularly, by 10%, 15%, some 25% if you're in Windsor. Let's have a look. Just have a look at how he says it.
Labour would freeze council tax next year. Yes, you heard it right. Not a penny more on your council tax. Not a penny more than the bill you paid last year.
I mean, it's unnecessary, isn't it? There's so many different ways you could say it.
Well, except, I mean, I do remember that now. That was a completely hypothetical situation. He was talking about hypothetically if Labour were in government now.
Yeah.
And this was what, 18 months ago.
But hypothetically or not, they are in government now, and he's not doing it. Hypothetically.
No, but I mean, he did explicitly say at the time that he was not making a promise for what they would actually do after the election in government.
No, see, you and I mean,
that's splitting
it
hairs,
is rather
taking people for fools, and I'm afraid there's he's done far too much of that, and it's come back to bite him.
Yes, I think so. But I mean, he's finally had the phone call from Donald Trump. I don't know how you feel about the length of that phone call, but my suggestion to you is that 45 minutes is perhaps a bit over generous given what the readout of the call was. I could have had that conversation in about 5 minutes, and I'm not suggesting that Downing Street are being economical with the truth, but it was suggested to me by a couple of listeners that maybe he was on hold for 40 of those 45 minutes and then finally got 5 minutes at the end.
No, well, the problem with those Downing Street readouts is that they don't contain anything that the other side says,
right?
Because that's a diplomatic convention. You don't brief your media as to what foreign leaders are saying.
Right. So although I've seen the White House readout's even shorter than the Downing Street one.
Yeah, but I suspect Donald Trump did most of the talking, and Keir Starmer listened. And Donald Trump, as we know, can talk the hind legs off a donkey, and can ramble all over all sorts of subjects. So goodness knows what he was talking about.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that they didn't appear to have been talking about any of the difficult subjects, such as Lord Mandelson's appointment as Washington ambassador, the Chagos Islands, the Ukraine war, and tariffs.
Yes.
They didn't seem to have discussed any of that.
No. And what are you hearing about? What are you hearing about the Mandelson scenario? Because that's quite interesting. Because presumably, I don't know whether the current ambassador is still in situ. The one that apparently, I think the Trump administration were quite happy. They were quite happy to keep her on. What is there a deadline of any kind? I mean, does the new ambassador have to be in place by a particular date?
No, we were told that Peter Mandelson was going to take over after the inauguration.
Right.
Which is now sort of 10 days ago, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, what is interesting with Donald Trump is that we've never heard him say anything on this subject. Right. So we don't. I mean, all we've heard is talk from his courtiers,
right?
And all that's off the record as well. So we just don't know what the president thinks. But it was extraordinary that he said on the record that he thought, he was interviewed by the BBC. So he said he thought Keir Starmer was doing a good job, and they had they got along fine.
Right. But is that not part of the art of the deal that Trump does? You know, he kind of messes around with people's heads. He wants, it's a bit like, you know, certain management techniques that some of us may or may not have used in the past, where and it's a sort of carrot and stick approach where, you know, he doesn't want to fall out with Keir Starmer, but he did, I think, keep him slightly on tenterhooks by not making the call until Sunday. And then shortly before he makes the call, he says something nice about him. So the call is already easier because you've already kind of broken the ice, as it were.
Yes, I mean that's Donald Trump through and through, isn't it? It makes it very hard to read what his real intentions are.
Right.
It keeps Keir Starmer on his toes. I mean, he must be really worried about the threat of tariffs. But
well, especially now that he's seen what Trump did to the Colombians when he got given a bit of short shrift from them. Suddenly he was like, right, well, you're going to get basically the full force of the United States of America coming down on you from a great height. And they were like, oh, okay then. Well, in that case, you go ahead.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the thing about Donald Trump is he likes threatening tariffs. But he never actually has to impose them. I mean, if you look at his first term, he did impose a few limited tariffs on China and the EU and on Britain. Yeah. But they were very limited and they didn't last very long. So I think you know, there's hope that we will not be driven into recession by the,
I mean, I know that you and I probably won't agree on whether Trump is a good thing or not, but I mean, he has been remarkably busy for a guy who's only been in power for a week, and for somebody of his age, I mean, he doesn't seem to stop. I mean, he's he sorted the Colombian thing out while he was on the golf course, you know, and meanwhile before that he'd been in LA, he'd been in Las Vegas, he'd been to visit some people in North Carolina. This is all in the same 24-hour period. You know, I don't know when he sleeps.
No, and he does seem to have made some difference. I mean, you've got to hand it to him that situation in Israel, the peace deal between Israel and Hamas. Yeah, I don't think that would have happened if he hadn't been out.
No question. No.
So that, you know, some good will come out of Donald Trump, and some bad things, you know, that he has threatened won't happen, like tariffs and the idea that he's going to force Ukraine to surrender to Putin. You know, obviously, you know, he was going to end that war on day one, but that's another thing we haven't heard about. I mean, what's interesting about Trump is the thing, you know, he does talk a lot and he does a lot and he's very active, but you can look at the things he doesn't do as well.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, I guess you can't do everything. Rome wasn't built in a day and all that kind of thing. Meanwhile, if they want to build a third runway at Heathrow, I'm reliably informed it would take at least 10 years, knowing British ingenuity. Why are they making this such a big thing to have a row about?
Well, because it's a symbol, isn't it? I mean, it's just part of the Rachel Reeves relaunch as the Chancellor for Growth, having scared us all, and by talking the country down for 6 months. Decided to come out all optimistic and say growth is possible, and everybody knows that, you know, the third runway is probably never going to be built.
No,
but the symbolism of being in favour of it, I think, might persuade businesses that she's serious about growth, and if they have a cabinet about it, even better.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is, though, you know, this performative stuff, you know, we've seen it come and we've seen it go, and you can't just keep saying you're going to do things and never do them, and you can't also keep saying that you're never going to do things and then do them, because that seems to be the government that we currently have. You know, anything they said they would never do, they're doing. Everything they're promising to do, they're not doing.
No, well, this pension stuff that they are doing today, I mean, it sounds very boring and technical, allowing defined benefit pension funds to invest their surpluses more riskily.
Right.
I mean, that sort of sounds like the sort of thing that's not going to end well. But I mean, it could make quite a difference in the next few years.
Right.
And I think that will send a signal to business that she's serious about trying to promote growth.
I mean, I saw a piece yesterday, and I can't remember where I saw it, where it was talking about the price of bonds and the yields and all of that, and that does seem to have stabilised a bit since about 2 weeks ago, when it was all looking a bit desperate, and we were looking like we were heading for some kind of financial crash. The markets seem to have sort of calmed down a bit, and I don't know whether that's something that she's done or whether it's just something that the markets have done for themselves.
Well, yeah, I think there was just a bit of a blip. I mean, there was just a bit of alarm about the fact that growth seemed to be so sluggish that she was going to have to come back with more tax rises, and people were pretty upset about that and thought that might lead to more borrowing as well. But yeah, no, that moment has passed,
Yeah.
and it's possible that when the OBR makes its forecast in March, she'll just about scrape through and stick by her rules. In which
Yeah.
case, that'll be a huge victory for her.
Well, it will. And I wonder as well whether part of this whole kind of last week or so has been that the Trump effect has kind of sucked all the oxygen out of politics, so that, people are looking across the Atlantic and going, wow, look at what he's doing. And it's been a sort of relatively quiet week, I would say, politically for the government here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, the distraction of all that is useful to the government. But I mean, they've got an awful lot of problems coming down the line. I mean, Angela Rayner's employment rights measures are obviously contrary to what Rachel Reeves is talking about, because that's like another burden for business.
Right.
And you've got to wonder whether they are actually going to go ahead with that.
Right. And also I was told this morning by another commentator that there's an Angela Rayner kind of housing thing coming out soon as well, which will have a lot to do with how much money is going to be given to local councils, and whether council tax goes up as a result of that, because there might be a shortfall, is also going to be tough for Angela Rayner.
Well, true. I mean, nobody thinks that the Labour government's going to build 3 million houses. But I mean,
well, no, of course not, because they said they would. So of course they're not going to do it.
Well, but it's sort of what you were saying about performative policies, isn't it, Mike? At least their line is at least they're trying. I mean, it's a bit like their line on net zero. Nobody thinks they're going to decarbonise the electricity grid by 2030, which is now only what 4.5 years away now.
Right.
But they are hoping to get some credit for trying. The problem is a lot of people realise that that sort of dash to decarbonise is going to be extremely expensive, and they're hoping they won't succeed.
Right. And let me ask you finally about Lord Hermer, because I still think he's the next guy on the firing line. He's now come out and admitted that he does have conflicts of interest, and he's often had to recuse himself from giving advice to the government, which surely makes his role as the Attorney General not much use, doesn't it?
No, I mean, as a very recent lawyer, he's bound to have been involved in some cases where there will be conflicts, and these have been pointed out, such as he acted for Jerry Adams and for what's
Shamima Begum, right?
Yeah. So those are two very controversial cases.
Yeah.
He's done a very interesting interview yesterday on whether he thinks the government's policy towards Israel is compatible with international law, and he actually said it was, which will come as a surprise to quite a lot of people, I think,
including David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary.
Well, yes, who sounded very very doubtful about it when he was questioned in the House of Commons the other day. So. Yeah, no, you're right. He's Lord Hermer now, isn't he?
Yes,
he's in a very he's in a very tricky position.
Yeah.
I mean, the intersection of international law and government policy is one of those things where things can go wrong quite.
And it's
quite
also it's not I wouldn't expect him not to have recent legal connections to various clients, but my point I suppose is that if he's there to advise the government and to advise the Prime Minister on matters of the law, but that he's conflicted because of some of the work that he's done recently, then he can't really do his job properly.
Well, I think he can most of the time. Put it that way. He's got deputies.
Most of the time is all very well, but I mean, he is in the cabinet. He's supposed to be doing it all the time, isn't he?
Well, yes. But
I'm just thinking it's been a few weeks since we had a cabinet resignation. It's time
you want a cabinet resignation, and you want one today.
I'd like one before the end of January. Can we do that?
Yeah. I bet it'll be somebody we haven't thought of.
Okay, all right, somebody that has got a conviction we don't know about, very possibly.
Yeah, exactly.
John, delightful to see you. Thank you very much indeed.